It was a day like any other, bustling streets, the steady hum of engines, and passengers boarding and disembarking from buses on their way to work or errands. At first glance, nothing seemed out of the ordinary at the small bus stop, nestled in the heart of a busy city. The sun hung high, casting a warm glow over the pavement, and the usual crowd of commuters had gathered, their faces buried in their phones or staring into the distance. But amid the routine chaos, a peculiar figure darted into the scene, a stray dog. It wasn't unusual to see stray animals wandering the city, yet something about this dog immediately caught everyone's attention. It wasn't just roaming aimlessly or scouring for scraps, it had a purpose. The dog's eyes were focused, its body tense with urgency as it ran straight toward the bus that had just pulled up to the curb. The driver, a seasoned professional with years of experience navigating the unpredictable urban streets, spotted the dog and frowned. He'd seen his fair share of stray animals before, but this one was different. It wasn't just loitering around or trotting past. It was barking incessantly, pawing at the ground and blocking the bus's path. Passengers peered out of the windows, their curiosity piqued. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "What's that dog doing? Why won't it move?" Some passengers chuckled, dismissing it as the antics of a stray. Others grew visibly uneasy as the dog continued its relentless attempt to grab the driver's attention. The driver hesitated, his hand hovering over the gear shift. Part of him wanted to honk and scare the dog off, but something in its frantic behavior made him pause. This wasn't just a random outburst. The dog was trying to communicate. Finally, with a sigh, he decided to investigate. The bus door hissed open, and as it did, the dog's barking stopped momentarily. It looked up at the driver with pleading eyes, then turned and took a few steps away, pausing to glance back as if urging him to follow. "What's going on here?" one passenger muttered, leaning out of their seat to get a better view. Others began to murmur, some urging the driver to shut the door and keep going, but curiosity had already taken hold of the crowd. With a mix of skepticism and concern, the driver stepped down from the bus. The dog wagged its tail briefly, almost as if thanking him, before sprinting a short distance ahead and stopping again, looking back expectantly. "What could this dog possibly want?" someone asked aloud. The answer to that question would leave everyone at the bus stop in shock. What began as a seemingly random interruption to their day was about to become a moment they'd never forget, a moment filled with urgency, revelation, and an unexpected truth that would move even the most skeptical among them. And, as the passengers watched the driver hesitantly follow the dog, none of them could have predicted the incredible journey that was about to unfold. The dog's unusual behavior. The bus stop fell silent as the stray dog refused to budge from its position in front of the bus. Its persistence was undeniable. Unlike typical strays that might timidly dart away at the sound of a honk or the sight of approaching humans, this dog stood firm, barking with a mix of desperation and urgency that unsettled everyone who watched. Passengers exchanged glances, their curiosity quickly turning to concern. Some leaned against the windows, craning their necks for a better view. Others whispered among themselves, speculating about what the dog might want. "Do you think it's hungry?" one elderly woman asked, clutching her purse. A teenager shook his head, laughing nervously. "Nah, probably just a crazy stray. It'll leave when we drive off." The bus driver, however, couldn't ignore the dog's behavior. He'd seen countless stray animals during his years on the job, but none that acted like this. Its barks weren't random. There was a rhythm to them, almost like a plea. Every so often the dog would stop barking, tilt its head, and stare directly at the driver as if waiting for him to understand. Then it would resume its relentless attempts to capture his attention. What was the dog trying to say? The question gnawed at the driver as he tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He tapped the horn lightly, hoping the sound would scare the dog off. Instead, the opposite happened. The dog barked louder, its movements growing even more animated. It jumped up on its hind legs, pawing at the air as though begging for the door to open. The growing commotion began to stir mixed emotions among the passengers. Some were growing irritated. "We're going to be late," a middle-aged man in a suit muttered angrily, glancing at his watch. A young mother, holding her baby close, looked nervous. "What if it's dangerous? Stray dogs can bite," she said softly. But others were captivated by the dog's determination. "This isn't normal," said an older man seated at the back. "That dog's not just fooling around. It's trying to tell us something." The dog's movements became increasingly deliberate. It stopped barking momentarily and turned its head toward a nearby alley, wagging its tail briefly before returning its gaze to the driver. It barked again, more insistent this time, as though urging him to follow. The driver felt a pang of unease, but also a growing sense of responsibility. What if this wasn't just a random act? What if something or someone needed help? He knew the protocol. Drivers weren't supposed to stop for strays or get involved in anything that might delay the route. But this wasn't an ordinary situation. With passengers murmuring behind him and the dog's desperate cries ringing in his ears, he made a decision. He pulled the handbrake, opened the door, and stepped out. The dog froze for a moment, locking eyes with him. Then it barked once more and bolted a short distance away, stopping to look back. The driver hesitated. Should he follow? The passengers were divided. Some shouted for him to return to the bus, while others encouraged him to see where the dog was leading. The air buzzed with tension as the driver took a cautious step forward. Little did anyone know the dog's persistence was not only extraordinary, it was about to unveil a truth that would leave them all shaken to their core. A journey of discovery. The bus driver hesitated at the edge of the pavement, his gaze fixed on the dog that stood a few feet away. Its pleading eyes seemed to pull him forward, an unspoken urgency emanating from every fiber of its being. Behind him, the murmur of passengers grew louder. Some urged him to hurry up and return to the wheel, while others whispered nervously, speculating about what the dog might be leading him toward. "Don't waste your time," called out a suited man clutching a briefcase. But an older woman seated near the front countered, "Maybe it needs help. Can't you see how desperate it is?" The driver sighed, glancing back at his watch. His schedule was tight, and deviating from it could earn him a reprimand. But something about the dog's behavior was impossible to ignore. This wasn't random or aimless. The dog needed him. Taking a deep breath, he motioned for the passengers to stay put and began to follow. The dog wagged its tail briefly, a small gesture of acknowledgement, before darting ahead. The driver quickened his pace to keep up as the dog led him down a narrow side street, away from the noise of the main road. The passengers, their initial annoyance giving way to curiosity, pressed themselves against the bus windows. Some even debated stepping out to follow. Meanwhile, the young mother cradled her baby and whispered, "I hope this isn't something dangerous." The path the dog chose was anything but straightforward. It wove through alleys and cut across small patches of grass, occasionally stopping to look back and ensure the driver was still following. The man noticed something unusual in its behavior, an uncanny awareness, as though it understood the urgency of every second. "Where are you taking me, boy?" the driver muttered under his breath, his steps quickening as he navigated the unfamiliar terrain. The streets became quieter, the hum of the city fading into the background. After several minutes of this strange pursuit, the dog came to an abrupt halt near an overgrown ditch hidden by bushes. It barked sharply, pawing at the ground as though pointing out something hidden in the thicket. The driver approached cautiously, his heart pounding. He could hear faint sounds, muffled whimpers coming from somewhere ahead. Peering through the undergrowth, he froze. Lying just beyond the bushes was a small figure, motionless, tangled in the weeds. At first, he thought it was another animal, but as he stepped closer, his breath caught in his throat. It was a child, no older than 3 or 4, curled up and barely conscious. The driver's shock turned to action. He quickly knelt beside the child, checking for injuries. The child stirred faintly, letting out a weak cry, and the driver's heart ached at the sight. Turning back toward the bus, he waved frantically at the passengers, signaling for help. A few people rushed over, their initial skepticism replaced by alarm as they saw the scene unfold. "Call an ambulance!" someone shouted, and within moments, a phone was out and dialing. The stray dog, its mission seemingly complete, sat a short distance away, watching intently. Its tail wagged gently, a quiet reassurance as the humans sprang into action. This journey, led by a determined stray, had uncovered a life in peril. And though no one could explain how or why the dog had chosen to intervene, one thing was certain. Its instincts and persistence had made all the difference. The shocking revelation. As the paramedics arrived and worked swiftly to stabilize the unconscious child, a sense of shock and awe spread through the gathered crowd. The bus passengers, who moments ago had been impatient and skeptical, now stood in stunned silence. The stray dog, the unlikely hero of this unfolding drama, watched from a short distance, its intelligent eyes flicking between the rescuers and the child it had seemingly fought to save. The driver, still kneeling by the ditch, couldn't shake the image of the child's frail, dirt-covered form. How had the boy ended up here? And more importantly, how had the dog known to seek help? These questions swirled in his mind as he rose to his feet, his hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline coursing through his veins. One of the paramedics, a young woman with a calm but firm demeanor, turned to the crowd and spoke, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "The child is stable for now, but he was severely dehydrated. It's a good thing we got here in time." The weight of her words settled heavily on everyone present. Had it not been for the stray dog's unrelenting determination, the outcome could have been tragically different. The realization was almost too much to comprehend. This seemingly ordinary stray had single-handedly orchestrated a life-saving rescue. The onlookers exchanged glances, their earlier assumptions about the dog giving way to admiration and disbelief. The young mother, who had worried about the dog being dangerous, now clutched her baby tightly, tears glistening in her eyes. "That dog saved a life today," she whispered. The paramedics prepared to transport the child to the hospital, carefully lifting him onto a stretcher. One of them asked if anyone knew the boy's identity or family. A middle-aged woman in the crowd spoke up, her voice shaky. "I think I've seen him before. He's from the neighborhood. His parents must be frantic by now." As the ambulance doors closed and the sirens faded into the distance, attention turned back to the dog. It had wandered a little further away, now lying down near a patch of grass, panting but alert. The driver, feeling a surge of gratitude and curiosity, approached it cautiously. "Hey, boy," he said softly, crouching down to its level. The dog lifted its head and wagged its tail faintly, as if acknowledging his presence. It was then that the full gravity of the situation hit him. This dog, likely a stray with no one to care for it, had shown more empathy and courage than most humans would in the same situation. Without hesitation, it had stepped into danger to help another. A teenager from the bus broke the silence, saying what everyone else was thinking. How did the dog even know what to do? It's like it understood the kid needed help. No one had an answer, but the awe in their expressions said it all. The truth was both astonishing and humbling. This dog's instincts, loyalty, and determination had achieved something extraordinary. The driver made a silent promise as he stood up, looking at the dog with newfound respect. This was no ordinary animal. This was a hero, and its actions would not be forgotten. Immediate action and rescue. The atmosphere was electric with urgency as the ambulance sped away, carrying the child to safety. But the hero of the moment, the stray dog, stayed behind, watching the bus driver and the small group of passengers who had stepped forward to help. Its panting breaths and wagging tail seemed to convey both relief and exhaustion. The bus driver knelt by the dog, still marveling at its determination. "You saved that boy's life," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the commotion of passengers discussing the events that had just unfolded. Moments earlier, the scene had been pure chaos. The discovery of the child had prompted a flurry of activity. As the paramedics worked, the driver and a few passengers had done what they could to assist, offering water, clearing debris, and trying to comfort the boy, whose weak cries were the only sign of life left in him. The dog, however, had stayed near the edge of the ditch, its eyes never leaving the child. It had barked a few times, as if urging everyone to move faster, and pawed at the ground anxiously. Its every movement seemed to radiate an understanding of the gravity of the situation. One passenger, a middle-aged woman in a bright red jacket, had taken it upon herself to shield the child from the sun with her umbrella until the paramedics arrived. "I can't believe this dog led us here," she said to no one in particular, her voice tinged with awe. "It's like it knew we wouldn't have found him in time otherwise." Another passenger, a teenager with a camera phone, had been recording the entire ordeal. He captured the moment when the paramedics lifted the child onto a stretcher, the dog following closely behind, its tail wagging nervously as if to check on the boy's condition. "I'm putting this online," the teen said excitedly. "People need to know what this dog just did." The driver couldn't help but feel a swell of pride for the stray. Without its intervention, the child might have gone unnoticed for hours, or worse, not been discovered at all. The thought was chilling. After the ambulance left, attention turned back to the dog. Some passengers, initially skeptical of the stray, now approached it cautiously, offering scraps of food or gentle pats on the head. The dog accepted the kindness, but remained calm, as if aware that its job wasn't quite done. The driver stood and faced the crowd. "This dog isn't just some stray," he declared, his voice filled with conviction. "It's a hero. It knew what it was doing, and we owe it a lot." A ripple of agreement passed through the group. People began sharing stories of extraordinary animal behavior, but none seemed quite as incredible as what they had just witnessed. As the commotion died down and the bus prepared to continue its route, the driver made a decision. He wouldn't let the dog remain astray any longer. "You're coming with me," he said softly to the dog. It wagged its tail in response, perhaps sensing that its life was about to change forever. In that moment, the rescue wasn't just about the child. It was about the bond between humans and animals, a reminder of the unspoken connection that transcends species. And as the bus rolled away, the passengers left with a story they'd carry in their hearts forever. Reflection on the dog's actions. As the bus resumed its journey, a profound sense of quiet settled over the passengers. The earlier chaos and uncertainty had been replaced by a mixture of awe and contemplation. The stray dog, now curled up near the driver's seat, seemed calm and content, its heroic actions still fresh in everyone's minds. The magnitude of what had just unfolded was hard to grasp. A stray dog, often overlooked and dismissed, had not only recognized a life in danger, but had acted with unwavering determination to save it. How could it have understood the gravity of the situation? What instincts, or perhaps emotions, had driven it to intervene? These questions lingered in the minds of everyone who had witnessed the extraordinary event. For the bus driver, the experience was transformative. As someone who'd spent years on the road, he had seen the best and worst of human behavior. But never had he encountered an animal displaying such empathy and intelligence. The memory of the dog barking persistently, refusing to give up until help arrived, was etched into his mind. It had displayed qualities humans often aspired to help others. Passengers shared their thoughts in hushed tones, each trying to make sense of the dog's incredible actions. "I can't stop thinking about how it knew what to do," said the young mother who had been so wary of the dog earlier. "It's like it could sense the boy was in trouble and knew we'd understand if it got our attention." An elderly man seated near the back chimed in. "Animals have a kind of wisdom we often overlook. They see and feel things in ways we can't comprehend." His words resonated deeply, sparking a broader discussion among the passengers. Some recalled similar stories of animals showing remarkable empathy. Dogs alerting their owners to danger, cats staying close to sick family members, or even birds helping lost hikers find their way. But what made this moment so unique was that the dog had acted entirely on its own, without any training or incentive, and had done so for a complete stranger. The teenager who had been filming the event spoke up, his earlier excitement replaced by quiet admiration. "I'm posting this online, not just because it's amazing, but because people need to see what animals are capable of. Maybe if more people cared about strays, we'd see more stories like this." The reflection wasn't just about the dog's actions, it was about humanity's response to animals like it. The passengers had initially dismissed the dog as a nuisance, even a threat. But in the end, it had been the one to remind them of the power of compassion and the instinct to protect life. The driver glanced down at the dog as it lay peacefully by his feet. He'd already decided to take it home, ensuring it would never have to fend for itself again. For him, the dog's actions were more than just a heroic tale. They were a lesson in the power of kindness, a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary acts come from the most unexpected places. And as the bus rolled forward, each passenger carried with them a renewed sense of wonder for the connection between humans and animals, and a story they'd share for years to come. The aftermath and a heartwarming twist. The events of the day were far from over, but the initial shock and chaos had subsided. As the bus driver guided the vehicle back onto its route, the passengers remained unusually quiet, lost in their thoughts. Each of them replayed the moment the stray dog had led them to the ditch where the boy lay. For many, it was a humbling experience, a reminder of how even the most unassuming creatures could perform extraordinary acts of bravery. The dog, now settled near the driver's seat, seemed to have found a sense of peace. Its expressive eyes occasionally darted toward the road ahead or glanced up at the driver, who smiled faintly each time their gazes met. It was as if the dog knew it was safe now, having fulfilled its mission. Meanwhile, the video of the rescue captured by the teenager on the bus began spreading online. Within hours, it had garnered thousands of views and comments. People from all over marveled at the stray's actions, calling it a guardian angel, a hero, and proof of the incredible bond between humans and animals. As the day wore on, something unexpected happened. The boy's parents, frantic with worry, had contacted authorities and soon learned of the miraculous rescue. They rushed to the hospital, where the paramedics had taken their son, and were overwhelmed with relief to find him alive and recovering. Word of the dog's involvement quickly reached the family. Overcome with gratitude, the boy's mother insisted on meeting the animal that had saved her child. She contacted the bus company, and through the combined efforts of the driver and a few passengers, they arranged for a reunion at the hospital the following day. When the moment came, the scene was nothing short of heartwarming. The dog, now cleaned up and wearing a simple collar provided by the driver, walked into the hospital lobby with its tail wagging tentatively. The boy, still weak but awake and alert, broke into a small smile at the sight of his four-legged savior. The dog approached the boy's wheelchair cautiously, its movements gentle and deliberate. Then, as if recognizing him, it rested its head on the boy's lap, eliciting gasps and teary smiles from everyone present. "You saved my son," the mother whispered, her voice choked with emotion. She knelt beside the dog, running her hands through its fur, as tears streamed down her face. "How can we ever thank you?" The boy's father stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "This dog doesn't belong on the streets anymore. If it's okay with you," he said, turning to the driver, "we'd like to adopt it and give it a home." The driver smiled, nodding in agreement. "I was planning to take him in myself, but I think he belongs with you." The dog's tail wagged furiously, as if it understood the conversation. And just like that, the stray who had once wandered aimlessly through the streets became part of a loving family, its courage and compassion forever etched in their hearts. This twist brought a fitting end to a remarkable story, a tale of unexpected heroes, unbreakable bonds, and the life-changing power of kindness. Emotional conclusion: the truth will move you. As the bus rolled into the depot later that evening, the driver couldn't stop thinking about the day's events. The stray dog now rested peacefully by his feet, its head nestled on its paws, unaware of the lives it had touched in a matter of hours. The truth about the dog's actions had resonated deeply with everyone involved. Its bravery wasn't driven by reward or recognition, but by something far more profound, an innate sense of empathy. Despite being a stray, overlooked by society and left to fend for itself, the dog had shown more compassion and courage than most would expect from even the most selfless humans. The passengers who had witnessed the rescue carried the story with them. Some would share it with their families over dinner, their voices breaking as they described how a stray dog had reminded them of the goodness in the world. Others would replay the memory of the dog's determined barks and pleading eyes, wondering how they had almost dismissed it as a nuisance. For the boy's family, the truth was undeniable. Their son's life had been saved by a creature that many might have ignored. The reunion at the hospital had been the beginning of a beautiful bond, one born from an act of selfless heroism. The dog now had a name: Hope, a fitting tribute to the inspiration it had brought to their lives. But beyond the individuals directly involved, the dog's story began to ripple outward. The video shared online went viral, reaching millions of people across the globe. Comments poured in from strangers who found themselves deeply moved by the stray's actions. Some reflected on their own pets and the unconditional love animals bring into the world. Others pledged to do more for strays in their communities, inspired by Hope's story to see beyond appearances and recognize the value of every life. The bus driver, who had been the first to take the dog's pleas seriously, found himself changed in ways he hadn't anticipated. He'd always thought of himself as a practical man, one who followed schedules and adhered to rules. But that day, he had listened to his instincts and a dog's cries, and it had made all the difference. As he prepared to head home that night, he took one last look at Hope, now a symbol of everything he'd learned. Animals, he realized, have a capacity for love, loyalty, and understanding that often surpasses human expectations. Hope wasn't just a stray anymore. She was a reminder of what it means to truly care, even when the world has given you nothing in return. The truth of the day's events was simple yet profound. Heroes come in all forms. Sometimes they walk on 2 legs, and sometimes they wander the streets on 4, unnoticed and underestimated until their moment to shine arrives. Hope's story had moved everyone who encountered it, leaving behind a powerful lesson. Kindness isn't limited by species, and compassion has the power to change lives, both for the giver and the receiver. As you reflect on the extraordinary actions of a stray dog who saved a life, ask yourself, what can you do to make a difference in the world around you? Hope, the brave dog, didn't wait for the perfect moment. It acted on instinct, driven by love and compassion, regardless of the challenges she faced. Now, it's our turn to follow her example. In a world that can often feel cold and disconnected, let's choose to be the ones who care. Let's reach out to those who need help, whether they are humans or animals. Let's give a little more kindness, a little more time, and a little more attention to those who may be overlooked. Today, you can be a hero too. Consider adopting a pet from your local shelter, volunteering, or simply taking a moment to listen when someone or something needs you. You never know. Your small act of kindness might just be the spark that saves a life. Let Hope's story be a reminder that even the smallest gestures can have the most profound impact. Share this message, spread awareness, and let the world know that compassion never goes unnoticed. Every life matters, and every act of kindness ripples outward in ways we can't always see, but will always feel. Are you ready to be the hero someone needs today?